The 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I had bore as the best I could. But when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. You, who so well know the nature of my soul, will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to a threat. At length, I would be avenged. This was the point indefinitely settled. But the very definitiveness with which I would resolve precluded the idea of risk. I was not only punished, but I must punish with impunity. It is equally unredressed when the avenger fails to make himself felt as such as him who has done the wrong. It must be understood that neither by word nor deed had I given Fortunato cause to doubt my goodwill. I continued, as was my wont, to smile in his face, and he did not perceive that my smile now was a thought of his immolation. He had a weak point in this Fortunato, although in other regards he was a man to be respected and even feared. He prided himself on his connoisseurship in wine. Few Italians have the true Vignol spirit, for the most part of their enthusiasm is adopted in the suit of time and opportunity, to praise and impose upon the British and the Australian millionaires. In painting and in gemmary, Fortunato, like his countrymen, was a quack. But in a matter of old wines, he was sincere. I was skillful in Italian vintages myself, and brought largely when I could. It was about dusk, one evening during the supreme madness of the carnival season, that I encountered my friend. He accosted me with extreme warmth, for he had been drinking much. The man wore motley. He had a tight-fitting, party-striped dress, and his head was surmounted by the council calls of bells. I was so pleased to see him that I thought I would never have done wringing his hand. I said to him, "My dear Fortunato, you are luckily met. How remarkably well you are looking today. But I have prepared a bottle, what passes for Amontillado, and I have my doubts."
How? Amontillado? A bottle? Impossible. And in the middle of the carnival?
I have my doubts, and I was silly enough to pay the full amount of price without consulting you in the matter. You were not to be found, and I was fearful of losing a bargain.
Amontillado.
I have my doubts,
Amontillado.
and I must satisfy them.
Amontillado.
As you are engaged, I am on my way to Lucchesi. If anyone would have a critical turn, it is he. He will tell me,
Lucchesi can't tell a bottle of Amontillado from sherry.
and yet some fools will have it that his taste matches your own.
Come, let's go.
Whither?
To your vaults.
My friend, no. I will not impose upon your good nature. I perceive you have an engagement with Lucchesi.
I have no engagements. Come,
My friend, no. It is not...
let us go. Nevertheless, you've been imposed upon. And as for Lucchesi, he cannot distinguish a bottle of sherry from Amontillado.
Thus speaking, Fortunato possessed himself of my arm, putting on a mask of black soap and drawing a cloak closely upon my person. I suffered him to hurry me to my palazzo. There were no attendants at home. They had absconded to make merry in the honor of time. I told them that I should not return until the morning, and had given them explicit orders not to stir from the house. These orders were significant, I well knew, to ensure their immediate departure. I passed down the long and winding staircase, requesting him to be cautious as he followed. We came to the length of the foot of the descent, and stood there on the damp ground of the catacombs of the Montresors. The gait of my friend was as steady as the bells upon his cap jingled as he stood.
The bottle?
"It is further on," I said, "but observe the white webwork which gleams from these cavern walls." He turned to me and looked into my eyes with two filmy orbs that distilled into a rhythm of intoxication.
Mold?
"Mold," I replied. "How long have you had that cough?" My poor friend found it impossible to reply for many minutes.
It's nothing.
I said with decision. "Come, we will go back. Your health is precious. You are rich, respected, admired, beloved. You are happy as once was I. You are a man to be missed. For me, it is no matter. We will go back. You will be ill, and I cannot be responsible. Besides, Lucchesi..."
Enough! The cough is a mere nothing. It will not kill me. I shall not die of a cough.
True. And indeed, I had no intention to alarm you unnecessarily. But you should use all proper precaution. A draught of this beduct will defend us from the damps. Here I knocked off the neck of a bottle which I drew from a long row of its fellows and laid upon the mound. Drink, I said, presenting him the wine. He raised it to his lips with a leer. He paused and nodded to me familiarly while his bells jingled.
I drink,
He said,
to the buried that repose around us.
and I, to your long life. Here again he took my arm and we proceeded.
These vaults are extensive,
He said. The Montresors were a great and numerous family. A huge human foot dole in a field of azure. The foot crushed a serpent's rampant, whose fangs are embedded in the heel.
And the motto?
Nemor me it mean lecet. No one attacks me with impunity.
Good.
The wine sparkled in his eyes and the bells jingled. My own fancy grew warm with the Medoc. We had passed through the walls of the pilled bones and the casks and pungencies emanating, into an inmost recess of the catacombs. I paused again, and this time I had made a bold to seize Fortunato by the arm below the elbow. The mold, I said. See, it increases. It hangs like moss upon the vaults. We are below the river's bed. The drops of moisture trickle among the bones. Come, we will go, or it is too late. Your cough.
It's nothing.
He replied.
Let us go on. But first, another draught of the Medoc.
I broke and reached him another flagon of de Grace. He emptied it in a breath. His eyes flashed with a fierce light. He laughed and threw the bottle upwards in a gesture I do not understand. I looked at him in surprise. He repeated the movement. A grotesque one.
Do not comprehend?
He said. Not I replied.
You're not of the Brotherhood?
No.
You're not one of the Masons?
Yes.
You? Impossible. A Mason?
A Mason? I answered, producing a trowel from beneath the folds of my cloak.
You jest. But let us proceed to the Amontillado.
Be it so, I said, replacing the tool beneath the cloak, and again offering him my arm. He leaned upon it heavily. We continued our route and in search for the Amontillado. We passed through the range of low arches, descents, pass-ons, and descending again, arrived at the deep crypt, in which the foulness of the air caused the flammerex rather to glow rather than flame. At the most remote end of the crypt there appeared another less spacious. Its walls had been lined with human remains, piled to the vault overhead in a fashion of the great catacombs of Paris. 3 sides of the interior crypt were still ornamented in this manner, for the fourth of the bones had been thrown down and lay precipitously upon the earth, forming at one point a mound of some size. Within the walls, thus exposed by the displacement of bones, we perceive a still interior recess, in depth about 4 feet, in width of 3, and a height of 6 or 7. It seemed to have been constructed for no special use within itself, but formed merely the interval between 2 of the colossal supports of the roof in the catacombs. And was backed by their circumscribing walls of solid granite. It was in vain that Fortunato uplifted his dull torch, endeavored to pry the depths of the recess. Proceed. Herein is the Amontillado, as for Luchessery, I said.
He's an ignoramus.
Interrupted my friend, as he stepped unsteadily forward, while I followed immediately at his heel. In an instant, he had reached the extremity of the niche, and finding his progress arrested by the rock, stood stupidly bewildered. A moment more, and I had felted him to the granite. In its surface were 2 iron staples, distant from each other about 2 feet horizontally. From one of these suspended a short chain, and from the other a padlock. Throwing the links around his waist, it was by the work of a few seconds to secure. He was too astounded to resist. Withdrawing the key, I stepped back from the recess. Pass your hand. Over the wall, you cannot help the feeling of mold. Indeed, it is very damp. Once more, let me implore you to return. No? Then I must positively leave you, but but I must first render you all the little attentions in my power.
The Amontillado!
True. The Amontillado. As I said these words, I busied myself among the pile of bones in which I had spoken. Throwing them aside, I soon uncovered a quantity of building stones and mortar. With these materials, and with the aid of my trowel, I began vigorously to wall up the entrance of the niche. I laid the first tier of the masonry when I discovered that the intoxication of Fortunato had in a great measure worn off. The earliest indication I had that I was a low moaning cry from the depths of the recess. It was not the cry of a drunken man. There was a long, orotous silence. I laid the second tier, and the third, and the fourth. Then I heard a furious vibration of chains. The noise lasted several minutes, in which that I might hearken to the both more satisfaction. I ceased my labors and sat down upon the bones. When at last the clinking subsided, I resumed the trowel and finished without interruption at the fifth, the sixth, and the seventh tier. The wall was now nearly upon the level of my breast. I again paused, and holding the flambex over the masonwork, threw a few feeble rays upon the figure within. A succession of loud and shrill screams, bursting suddenly from the throats where the chain form, seemed to thrust me violently back. For a brief moment I hesitated, I trembled, I unsheathed my rapier, and began to grope with it upon the recess. But the thought at an instant reassured me. I placed my hand upon the solid fabric of the catacombs, and felt satisfied. I reapproached the wall. I replied to the yells of him who clamored. I re-echoed. I aided. I surpassed them in volume and in strength. I did this, and the clamorer grew still. It was now midnight, and my task was drawing to a close. I completed the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th tier. I had finished a portion of the last of the 11th. It remained with a single stone to be fitted, plastered in. I struggled with the weight. I placed it partly within the designated position, but now there came from out the niche a low laugh that erected the hairs upon my head. It was succeeded by a sad voice, which I had difficulty in recognizing as the noble Fortunato. The voice said,
Yes, the Amontillado. But is it not getting late? Will they not be waiting for us at the palazzo? The Lady Fortunato and the rest? Let us be gone.
Yes, let us be gone.
For the love of God, Montresor!
Yes, for the love of God! But to these words, I hearkened in vain for a reply. I grew impatient. I cried aloud. Fortunato. No answer. I called again. Fortunato! No answer still. I thrust a torch through the remaining aperture and let it fall within. There came forth a reply only of a jingle of bells. My heart grew sick. On account of the dampness of the catacombs, I hastened to make an end of my labors. I forced the last stone to position. I plastered it up. Against the new masonry, I re-erected the old dampage of bones. For the half of a century, no mortal had disturbed them. Adquiescet in pace.